Yeah, we're oftentimes too much in our head, and we have other capacities of knowing the world, right? We have a way of knowing that's through love and through the heart. We have a way of knowing that's through sensuality, through relational, through interaction with others. Using immersive technologies, the technologies adaptively listening to the person's voice and generating an audiovisual world based on the user's own voice. So it's as if you are creating your own psychedelic journey.
Welcome to the Mindfulness Experience podcast. My name is Keith Fiveson. On this podcast, I had the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Sandeep Prakash. He is the co-founder and the chief scientific officer at Entheo Digital. They are a platform that I found out about at the Microdose Wonderland conference, and I was really captivated by it because it draws on Western psychology, indigenous systems, and he's put together with his team a platform that really is transformative. That's the only way I can say it. He has his doctoral dissertation and research in exploring cutting-edge virtual reality technologies for psychological well-being, and he uses a novel collaborative design that really gets under the skin, if you will, and really tones the vagus nerve. It's the longest nerve in the body. It was a fascinating conversation. We really got into it, and I hope you enjoy the conversation. Welcome, please, Dr. Sandeep Prakash. Hey, I am here with Dr. Sandeep Prakash. What is happening? What's going on? Tell me. What's up, Sandeep? What are we talking about?
Well, we're going to dive into psychedelics, mindfulness, technology, digital therapeutics, maybe a little bit about how we can make the world a better place with technology.
I love that. So, well, first of all, let me back the truck up. I am incredibly thankful that you've taken the time to go ahead and talk to me about all of those subjects. And, I did a little bit of background and research. You have a really very impressive background in the digital therapeutics area, and you've been involved in the space as somebody who's really studied psychedelics. You were at the California Institute for Integral Studies, and now you're involved in this whole area called digital therapeutics. Why are you doing that? What's your company about? And what are digital therapeutics? I mean, many people haven't even heard about digital therapeutics. Tell me a little bit about that.
Digital therapeutics are use technology to deliver therapies. It's as simple as that. Therapeutics we tend to think about as either drugs or perhaps psychotherapy. And with advances in technology, such as the technology we're using right now to communicate, is part of this broader term known as digital health. And it's an attempt to figure out how can we bring therapies straight to people's homes, in their using mobile phones, using virtual reality, newer ways of thinking about technology and processing data, such as artificial intelligence, machine learning, to improve people's lives.
Wow. And we just finished up the Microdose Wonderland conference, and this is, it was a psychedelic conference, and this is how I learned about your company. And I had the, opportunity, and thank you very much for that, the opportunity to really undergo a 30-minute digital therapeutic experience with SoundSelf. And I have to say, it was a shift. It was a reboot, a reset, a reframe, and a real eye opener in so many ways, a real mind opener. And I'm just wondering how does that happen? What makes that so special because there was this quality that I just kind of talked about it. I think I said afterwards, it felt like I was going back into the womb. I felt like I needed to be covered, and I felt like just give me a heavy blanket, and just it was really incredible. How does that work? What's going on with that? I mean, it was I can't describe it. What is it?
That's great. It's almost it sounds like you had a psychedelic experience.
I mean, seriously,
something ineffable, something that.
But I didn't have
reframing.
mushrooms. I had no mushrooms. I had no stuff to really have that. How does that work?
Well, we tap into something that we believe in designing therapeutics that are participatory, meaning that we're not trying to give people a guided meditation and say, hey, we know what's best and you should do this, or do anything that's very kind of conceptual or cognitively oriented. In fact, one of our theses as a company is by far most teachings that people can access out there, or therapeutics or even digital therapeutics, are typically cognicentric, meaning that they tend to avoid our other ways of interacting with the world, other than our sort of rational mind.
Wait. Cognicentric. What? Like cognizant? Well, you're talking about like we're in our brains all the time and armored up.
We're in our head.
Is that what?
Yeah, we're oftentimes too much in our head, and we have other capacities of knowing the world, right? We have a way of knowing that's through love and through the heart. We have a way of knowing that's through sensuality, through relational, through interaction with others. So at Entheo Digital, we created SoundSelf to tap into something simple, just someone's their own voice. And by using something called vocal toning, which is inspired by chanting traditions. Chanting has been used in millennia in many, many contemplative traditions around the world to access group consciousness, to access non-ordinary states. But using immersive technologies, the technologies adaptively listening to the person's voice and generating an audiovisual world based on the user's own voice. So it's as if you are creating your own psychedelic journey simply by chanting, like
hearing sounds. I mean, just to be clear, I had a headset on, right, that was going ahead and providing me with audio. I had a microphone that was just sort of a really small microphone, hardly knew it, and these eye shades that had flickering lights, right? And then you have a sort of a more tripped out version where you have a vibrating bed. And so is all this working on my vagus nerve, my vagal tone? Is it working on the sensory aspects of my mind, the parasympathetic nervous system? I mean, what's going on, from a physiological, biological, neurological viewpoint that really has me kind of stepping out of, as you say, this cognicentric prefrontal cortex, default mode network kind of wrap, and has me kind of releasing myself up to, or giving myself up to something bigger.
So as you were laying there and as you started to produce tones, one of the things we know is that toning, for someone who has never maybe been trained in mindfulness, I know you've done a lot of mindfulness training, but let's say someone who has never done mindfulness before, simply by toning, they can get into a mindfulness state and sustain that much more easily than a mindfulness training, which tends to be more didactic. So toning is something that you're feeling in from your own body, and you're participating in this process, relational process with oneself and the world. So sound is something very, that's an interesting quality of sound, right? It's something that connects us internally. We can hear our heartbeat, we can hear our respiration, but it also allows us to interact with the outside world, to give and to receive. So,
one of the things I'm reading here, and I'm just like this whole idea of understanding the vagus nerve. So I mentioned that, and it's just for folks
Yeah.
that are listening, it's the longest nerve in the body. It connects the brain to the most important organs in the body, including the gut, the intestines, the stomach, the heart, the lungs. In fact, the word vagus means wander in Latin, which actually represents how the nerve wanders all over the body, and it is a key part of the parasympathetic rest and digest nervous system. So what we're
Right.
doing with your platform is we're getting into that. All right.
Right. And so exactly. So by toning, it's stimulating. One of the major passageways is in the kind of like in the towards the back of the neck
Mm-hmm.
right here.
Mm-hmm.
But as we're toning, we're stimulating the vagus nerve,
Hmm.
and it and that in turn is going to be more of a relaxation response,
Mm-hmm.
or activates the parasympathetic nervous system. And in our busy world, that's something that all of us need, is a way to quickly access a relaxation response. And so that's one of several of the core mechanisms.
Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, because
We
I felt like I was transported. So, I literally felt like I levitated or left my body, and I was
right.
I was in another world.
So typically, as we become
Mm-hmm.
more and more relaxed, as we're toning, we're stimulating the parasympathetic nervous system, stimulating the vagus nerve.
Mm-hmm.
We're becoming more and more relaxed. Toning also increases heart rate variability,
Mm-hmm.
which is good for just being more resilient in how you respond to the world and to stressors.
Mm-hmm.
But as you're toning, as you're becoming more and more relaxed, often the case is you could go to sleep.
Mm.
But what we're also doing is we're modulating the visual field, that you sustain attention and you
Mm-hmm.
go into a cognitive flow state,
Mm-hmm.
meaning that it's hard for any intrusive thoughts to come to the mind. It's hard to fall asleep.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of this sort of sweet spot between being very, very relaxed. You mentioned my
Mm-hmm.
earlier work on float tanks,
Mm-hmm.
and that's something that float tanks do really well, but it's easy to go to sleep. You can
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, if you go to sleep, you miss out on the
Mm-hmm.
real benefit
Mm-hmm.
of the mindfulness experience, of the imaginative experience.
Mm-hmm.
But if we can be really, really relaxed and then sustain attention in a flow, in a focused way, there's some pretty amazing things that can happen. And so so that's kind of like our sweet spot in our mechanism.
So one of the things you talked about in terms of the float tank, when I saw one of the videos you did around that, and you started talking about shadow work, and the whole area of shadow. And I'm wondering, like, when we start taking a look at shadow, one of the things I was aware of as I was doing the work was this whole idea of expressing sound, and how sound often relates to, real repressed or held emotions that are somatically held in the body. Peter Levine talks about, how trauma is held stored within the body, and often how somatic work, which really involves tone, it really involves the whole area of sound, I mean, and you have an audio that really plays within the structure there. You do A, E, I, O, U, or the tones. Can you walk through that? Is there an element of being able to work with trauma, and what happened? How? Because I know you're doing a lot of work in terms of the brain, in terms of, you're doing a lot of studies. But is that what's happening? Because I felt really good afterwards. I felt like I was purged, and I had the sense of purging, while not, wasn't on an ayahuasca journey, but I had the sense that I was able to purge through sound. Is there some validity in that?
I think so. We're, as a company, we're definitely influenced by the aspect of ayahuasca and healing through ayahuasca, and purging, and through somatics as well. And one of the things we've designed into it is to get people to start experimenting with sounds.
Mm.
And then from after that, it's a short guided meditation, but after that, it's just the person producing tones
Mm-hmm.
and the system interacting. So
Mm-hmm.
the system is playful. It's and trying to encourage longer and longer
Yeah,
tones to relax. But hearing your own
walk us
voice.
through that journey. Walk us through that journey. I get on to the bed. What is the journey? And like, I'll be quiet and let you just walk through it, because we didn't start there and we're just sort of jumping around. So walk us through the journey. Yeah.
So you put on the headset, the headphones, microphone, press play, lay down comfortably, ideally with a blanket. Voice comes and asks you to gently start feeling relax in your body, acknowledging any feeling sensations. And then in this, you didn't try this one, but this is the longer experience that we do, is we ask the person, the guide asks the person, how are you feeling? And encourages them to speak for about 30-45 seconds. So this person just talks, stream of consciousness, how they're feeling right now in the moment. And then a bell comes, and then we guide the person in different sounds they can make. A, E, I, O, U, Oo. And we also start with humming, like with the mouth closed. One of the things we've learned over the years of developing this, probably been developing this for 10 years, but we just don't engage in this type of activity in our society. And unless you go to a yoga class, maybe you chant Om at the end. But if you look at indigenous societies, that their singing and dance is integral to life, to understand the world. But anyway, humming is a way to just start to introduce people into people feel a little bit more comfortable with that. We get them to open the mouth, open the jaw, relax, and then and then, so as this is happening, the person is realizing, oh, I'm influencing the musical world. So if you change whatever pitch you're at, doesn't matter. And also the qualities of the sound is determining the audio, the musical world, actually. And this feels good. There's something like playful and feels good. And then as the guide kind of says, okay, from here on out, I'll meet you at the other side. And you're toning throughout 15-20 minutes. And at the end, the guide comes back. You have a shavasana where you're sort of resting and integrating the experience. And then we ask another voice elicitation of how are you feeling after after you've gone through this. Can you maybe revisit how you're feeling earlier and talk for about 30-45 seconds? So with that before and after voice elicitation, we do an artificial intelligence voice analysis where we get a marker of mental fitness. So if you do this, if you have this in your home, if you go to the clinic and use this, you'll be able to track over time your mental fitness, which is analyzed through vocal biomarkers through artificial intelligence. So that's the gist of the experience. We have other modes, but some are more passive. Some are used like some are for expert mode. If someone has already knows the guided meditation, they've used it a number of times. They just want to jump into toning. They can do that. But yeah.
Great. So there are multiple modes, and one of the things that I love this process of being able to reverberate and actually control or seem like I was, like, as you say, the music and the lights and the ability. There is this and this the vagal toning, or the vagus nerve. It's the vagus nerve is connected to the vocal cords and the muscles in the back of the throat. And, this whole singing, humming, chanting, moving, this all stimulates the nerves. So there is this whole relaxation, this transporting response, the sense of like being at one with everything. And it really, I really felt like I was in the womb. I felt like I was, again, like I just wanted a heavier I wanted a heavy blanket over me. And, it was, so how many versions are there in the audio? And you said there are different kinds of qualities of audio. You said there are 2 or 3, or what's up with that?
Well, there's several modes that depending on the circumstance. Like if
Okay.
someone is more experienced with it, we have an
Mhm.
experimental mode that's used for low dose ketamine,
Mhm.
or I've used it with with cannabis as well.
Mhm.
Um, it's it's a way to parts of it are more passive, and
Mhm.
you can kind of control whether you want to have the audio and lights go without toning, and you can
Mhm.
come into toning whenever you want. But essentially, the experience is different every time because it's controlled by your voice.
Right.
It feels like a new experience every time.
Right.
And uh, you were mentioning this idea of transporting,
Mhm.
and I talked about the core mechanisms of relaxation response,
Mhm.
cognitive flow. Now there's this other mechanism that is only enabled by immersive technology. It's like if we did this experience on like watching it on like a phone or
Mhm.
something like that,
Mhm.
it would be really hard to replicate it.
Yeah.
But
No. Yeah.
through immersive technology, we achieve this aspect of transporting or out of body.
Mhm.
And one research study we did that was a long-term study, people doing it 2 to 3 times per week for six
Mhm.
weeks.
Mhm.
One of the clear outcomes is that it achieves a quasi out of body effect. And this
Mm.
has been shown in the virtual reality literature that it's
Mhm.
possible to have out of body effects.
Mhm.
And these have definite mental health implications.
Mhm.
There's been research on out of body
Mhm.
with VR with anorexia,
Mhm.
uh, and it's all been relegated to research and the lab. And now we're only seeing it come out and being able to actually be available. And this
Mhm.
is part of why we're in the digital therapeutic space, is that we can bring things that have been researched for a long time that
Mhm.
required expensive computers or expensive VR to in much more accessible and scalable VR hardware now.
Mhm.
But in the research, we saw that this out of body effect, where people felt like they're both in the body and somehow out of the body as well.
Mhm.
What this is allowing is to step a little bit back
Mhm.
from anything that's afflicting the
Right.
person. Oftentimes, we get
Like a
trapped
witness.
into
Like a witness. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. So we're training this aspect of witness awareness,
Mhm.
um,
Mhm. Mhm.
and it's something subtle yet profound of just recognizing
Mhm.
oneself as completely safe,
Mhm. Mhm.
completely secure, despite anything else that's happening. And
So,
this is a teaching that takes sometimes
right.
decades. That
Right.
in the Buddhist and Vedanta traditions,
Right.
this is something they focus on: is how can we
Mhm.
recognize
Mm.
a reality that
Mhm.
is phenomenologically
Mhm.
distinct from
Mhm.
the everything else.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I have to say, I was smiling and still, had through my meditation practice, still had this euphoric recall. And one of the things I've noticed is, you've done a lot of studies, and an increase in gamma across the brain, a decrease in activity in the regions associated with the default mode network, but also improving psychological well-being around depression, wellness, anxiety, mindfulness,
Mhm.
mysticism, and overall well-being. So, like, that was all part of your 6-week study, right?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
And the other question, you had mentioned a ketamine session. So when we start taking a look at psychedelics, where is the market for this? Where do you see your product integrating into healthcare, psychotherapy, or even what I would look at as well is substance use disorder treatment? Working with individuals that might be dealing with
Hmm.
trauma, or individuals that might be looking at substance use as a way to go ahead or behavioral use as a way to go ahead and cope with very challenging, difficult stresses or emotional conditions.
Hmm. So we're looking into various indications
Mm-hmm.
to approach the FDA.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we're also working with experts such as yourself
Mm-hmm.
that have expertise in a particular field, whether it's substance use,
Mm-hmm.
anxiety, depression, PTSD, um, and we can custom tailor
Mm-hmm.
the experience uh, to to the indication.
Mm-hmm.
So right now we don't make any claims other than this is something that is
Mm-hmm.
highly effective for getting into an altered state of consciousness, training in mindfulness, training in attention and absorption. but those things happen to play a large role in the treatment of a variety of mental health disorders. But so we work alongside therapists. This isn't a tool that it's really magnified with psychotherapy.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, even something like couples therapy, where if it's someone goes, one person in the couple does the experience while a therapist and their partner are witnessing them, it enables them to maybe relax into a place of vulnerability, so after the session, they can go into psychological material with a feeling of support and vulnerability and witnessed by their community of support around them. And so similarly within psychedelic medicine, we have it's really uncertain how we're going to solve these challenges of doing preparation and integration right. And it's just having a few psychotherapy sessions for someone who has never done psychotherapy before, who's facing really, really profound psychological suffering. It's unclear if what we see in clinical trials will be replicated in the real world. And so what we intend to enable that psychedelic therapy process by providing a medically regulated, insurance reimbursable product in the preparation and integration phases that the person can do anytime. They can come into the clinic and do it. And next year, we're going to have an at-home version where they can the doctor can give them a unit, they can go at home with it, and they can do it anytime when it's convenient for them to learn these practices of getting into an altered state without a drug, and practice just self-compassion, which plays a big role in substance use disorder. And
love that. I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. And one of the things you say in the material is best use for the preparation for a psychedelic therapy, the integration for transformative therapy, the removing of the charge of undesirable emotional patterns, activating intuitive states of consciousness, quieting the mental chatter, improving sensory awareness and embodiment, improving sleep, improving creativity. I mean, all within the ability to go ahead and have this toning, the sound toning, and to be able to go ahead and get out of your head and really get into your body, and to go ahead and recognize your own sense, your own voice, your own sound self, right? I mean, and that play on words, I think, is great, because it's not only about sound in terms of, the sound that we make, which really, our thoughts create our words create our reality, but then it's also around the soundness, right? The wholesomeness, the integrative, the integral self, and the ability to recognize our own embodiment. Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah, it's really multifaceted. I love how you put it, and all these things play a role. Each person, in a sense, as psychiatry is understanding more and more, we require a multifactorial approach to the treatment. Each person requires a multifactorial approach to their own healing journey. Like, if just journaling for integration isn't going to work for most people.
Right.
It requires community of support. It requires maybe approaching after doing a psychedelic and figuring out how they're going to talk to their parents about something. If we can provide this tool that is a little bit more comprehensive in a person, how they step into their own healing journey in these different ways, then we feel successful.
Wow. So I really love this, and I really want to say again, I think this is the beginning of a much bigger movement, a much bigger change. This is not only about taking psychedelics or mindfulness or meditation. It's really how to integrate your whole self through sound, through the soundness of recognizing yourself. It's in and of yourself, if you will. Let me ask you, Entheo Digital, how do people get a hold of you? Your website, how do people find out more? You're in the beta phases right now. Is that still happening?
We're moving from a beta to a more of a early access. But essentially it's the same. We're asking people to apply, and we'd like to work with people who are curious, enterprising, clinicians that would provide feedback, willing to provide feedback for our research, participate in an ongoing research study that we just started recruiting for a large observational study of the mental health effects of SoundSelf. And so people can visit Entheo Digital, ENTHEO.DIGITAL, and find us there and shoot us a interest form response, and we'll get back to you.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, really, again, Dr. Sandeep Prakash, who is who's the chief scientific officer, but he's also co-founder of the company. And I'm, again, so glad and so honored that you took the time to go ahead and share this whole area of digital therapeutics, which is really an emerging field. And it's very, very exciting. And I'm glad to not only know about it, but to have experienced it. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, Keith. It's a pleasure to speak with you about it.
Thank you for listening to the Mindfulness Experience podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and leave us a review. We have other exciting guests coming up in the next few weeks, so stay tuned. For more mindfulness tips and tricks, visit our website at workmindfulness.com. Thanks again for being a part of the Mindfulness Experience. This is Keith Fivesen.